our team. Good morning. We've got over 100 people from around the region joining us so far, more folks joining as I speak. So we'll give people just another minute to jump on before we get into this really important topic of transportation safety that we're talking about today. And I'll look for our folks to give me the go ahead for when we should actually get started.
Since we are recording, I believe if the team is ready, we can begin.
Okay, I see various people nodding affirmatively, so we'll go ahead and get started. Well, again, good morning, everybody. My name is Andrew Gruber. I'm Executive Director at the Wasatch Front Regional Council, and we want to thank all of you very much for joining today for this webinar to talk about, again, a really critical subject, which is transportation safety. As the purpose of this webinar is to give everybody here around the region an overview of our work together to develop, as you can see on the screen in front of you, a comprehensive safety action plan. We have recently, at the request of many municipalities around the region, the Wasatch Front Regional Council applied for and was granted a federal Safe Streets for All. That's the federal program grant. And the purpose of that grant is to develop this comprehensive safety action plan. Now, most of you probably know this, but just in case you don't, WFRC, we are a metropolitan planning organization for the majority of the Wasatch Front. So we're a public agency, a government agency that brings together stakeholders from around the region to plan for the future of our transportation system. And so that means building roads, transit, trails. But for any of that to work, for people, particularly for people to have the option, a viable option to not drive, to walk, to bike, perhaps in combination with transit, that system has to be safe. It's critical for people to feel comfortable using the system. It has to be safe because we want to avoid injury and death, of course, but also we want people to feel comfortable getting out of their cars and making that choice. So it's at the top of our priority at WFRC, at UDOT, at UTA, at the Mountain Land Association of Governments, and all of our partners in the cities and counties, the consulting agencies all around the region. So many of you who are here with us today, safety is critical. And so we're very appreciative of all of your partnership on putting this together. And with that, I'm going to turn to Kip Billings with Wasatch Front Regional Council. He is our project manager, and he's going to give you an overview of what we're going to accomplish today. And thanks again for all of your partnership in this important work. Kip?
Thank you, Andrew, for that introduction. I wanted to give you, first of all, an idea of how we've set up today's meeting because of our time constraints and the number of participants involved. We are using a webinar format, so you will be able to see the slides and hear the presenters, but not other participants. We encourage you to use the chat box if you have questions or comments, and we'll be monitoring those. If there are some comments that will help with our clarifying our presentation today, we'll address those today. Other comments that maybe get more detailed, we will record those and reach out offline to address all of those. Those will become part of the record. If the raise hand option is working, we're not going to be recognizing raised hands to hear verbal comments. There would, again, because of the interest in time. So the slide in front of you, that's kind of our agenda for today. I'll review that briefly. We want to explain the need and the purpose for local road safety and this comprehensive safety action plan. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as action plan or CSAP. That's the product that we are producing with this effort. The Safe Streets for All program, sometimes abbreviated SS4A, is intended for local road safety. The UDOT is not an eligible applicant, but if state road concerns in your community are your primary concern, then with coordination with UDOT, you could apply this program to a state road. But again, the focus is for to provide these resources for local governments and locally owned and maintained roads. So we'll introduce this new Safe Streets for All program, where it came from. And then at that point, I'll turn time to Brent Crowther with Kimley Horn Consultants. He's going to explain more in detail the action plan contents and process. That will include geographic focus areas that will be part of the action plan development, allowing the study to look at specific needs. For example, the needs in Salt Lake City could be very different than safety needs in Tooele County. We have some preliminary crash analysis results to share on a regional scale. And again, when we get into the action plan development, that same type of analysis will be conducted on the local scale for the geographic focus areas. And then we're going to introduce the safe system approach, which is kind of a paradigm shift in the approach to transportation safety, that we try to be more proactive versus reactive. So we'll get into that a little bit as well. So thank you, Brent. Take a look here at some of the national trends in roadway safety. Nationally, roadway fatalities exceed 30,000 each year, and this is trending upward, even approaching 40,000 in 2020 data. The blue line going across the top of the bars, that's showing the national trend in traffic volume, which is also trending upward, which partly explains the increase in roadway fatalities. But that's kind of the paradigm shift we're looking to change, that increase in traffic should not automatically come with an increase in fatalities. This new paradigm is that we can reduce the risk of fatalities and serious injury when using our public roadways. I'm going to go to the next one. Here, this slide is illustrating that while we've made improvements in vehicle safety technology, that's improved the likelihood of surviving or even avoiding crashes altogether. But at that same time, pedestrians and bicycle users of the roadway, they don't have those same protections. And these vulnerable roadway users are showing up in larger proportions among fatalities and serious injuries. So this plan will spend some time focusing on those needs as well. The Safe Streets for All provides municipalities with the potential resources to address roadway safety issues. It's a discretionary grant program, part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. The Safe Streets for All provides about $5 billion annually over 5 years. We're already into year 2, so we've got about another 3 years of these grants available. So you will be able to apply for implementation grants next year to make recommended roadway safety improvements in your community. And we wanted you to be aware that these grants require a 20% local match. So the purpose statement we've adopted for this action plan is a plan to provide local governments the means to make strategic roadway safety improvements. So maybe repeating myself, but the action plan itself that we're working on this year does not produce safety projects that are going to happen in your community. Each city will need to apply for grants using this action plan as a resource to justify those safety improvements. For example, if the action plan found that roundabouts were an effective safety improvement in certain cases, then the action plan will outline the costs and safety benefits of roundabouts and include a map of candidate locations with the corresponding risk factors that would benefit from that kind of improvement. It would then be incumbent on each city or group of cities to make application for grants to implement a project like that. So for the safety action plan to be complete, it's subject to a self-certification. There are certain criteria that Federal Highways has identified that need to be included in the action plan. So two of those that are required, there must be a thorough safety analysis, and you will get a glimpse of that a bit later in this presentation, at least on the regional scale, the types of analysis that's being done. The safety analysis will look at trends, locations, and risk factors with a focus on local or municipal roads as opposed to state roads. But we're looking at the whole spectrum to identify what the needs are. The action plan will also include recommendations for safety strategies, a cost-benefit analysis for each strategy, and a map of locations best suited for those strategies. And the other part of the checklist, 4 of these 6 elements need to be included in order to pass this self-certification test. And our work scope touches on actually on all 6 of these elements. First, we will be looking at a regional safety goal adopted by local officials. That's something along the lines of UDOT and their Zero Fatalities campaign. Okay, some idea like that. There needs to be a planning committee. So you will hear later on in the presentation about the steering team that we have formed, and then the role of the geographic focus areas. Public and stakeholder engagement, that will be addressed through the geographic focused area meetings. And there will also be a website where the general public can make comments and express concerns. Outreach targeted to underserved communities, safety needs will also be addressed in the development of the plan, and a review of current policies and standards as needed. And then we will set up a perpetual process for tracking and reporting safety improvements. So that's kind of the introduction of the Safe Streets for All program. Before I turn this to Brent to go into more detail about the action plan, are there any questions from the chat box that we should address at this point?
At this point, no.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn the time to Brent.
Great. Well, thank you, Kip, and thank you, Andrew, for kicking us off.
Just want to briefly introduce our project team. My name is Brent Crowther. I'm with Kimley Horn, and I am the project manager for the consultant team. Joining me on the call from Kimley Horn are Jacob Farnsworth, who's monitoring the chat. Maybe give a wave, Jacob. And then Eric Sweat, who's taking notes for us. And then we have sub-consultants on our team, Maria Vias with Farron Piers, Amy Rock with Penna Powers, and Justin Smart with Penna Powers. So we appreciate each of these partners and look forward to working on this plan together with you all. I am just going to give a brief overview of what our scope and our schedule looks like. We initiated the project in July. I think it was July 3rd is when we got our contract underway. And so we, over the past 6 weeks or so, we've been digging into our safety analysis, and we're going to present some very treetop results and then show you the process, and we'll be sharing that with you at a later time during the study. And today represents what we call our safety launch. That's really to engage our stakeholders, let them know the process and how they will be informed throughout the study. We have two key touch points where we're engaging with all of our what we're calling geographic focus area planning teams. In October, we're going to be scheduling a meeting with these teams, and we'll have 12 teams. Everyone on this call, plus many more, will be organized into a team and invited to participate. We're conducting those 12 different meetings in the region in the month of October and early November. And then we launch into strategy and project selection between November and January 2024. And then we will bring those projects back to you in early 2024. And we want to make sure that everybody is aware of the projects we've identified, where the study is headed, so then you can begin to identify projects that you may be interested in preparing an application for through the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. We anticipate that NOFO in 2024 will be out in the April timeframe is what we would project. And that will be due in early July if it's consistent with how it was this year. So we will have our materials and information ready for you beginning in that April timeframe, going through our finalization with a draft and final report, gaining what we call a leadership commitment. That will be a resolution of a commitment to reduce fatalities and fatalities and serious injuries throughout the region. And then convening everybody together for what we're calling a SS4A regional workshop, where we'll present the report findings, present that regional commitment and that safety resolution for adoption by, it could be a regional council or WFRC director. And then we'll ask if individual city councils are also willing to pass that resolution, and then present the findings here in July of 2024. To the WFRC committees. And Jacob, if there's any questions that come up regarding this process, please don't hesitate to interrupt.
Will do.
Want to describe what our planning structure. We have organized three teams. One is our steering team, and they will be meeting approximately monthly. And I'll show you the membership of that here in just a minute. Second is our geographic focus area safety planning teams. And as I mentioned, we'll be meeting with them in October and February of 2024. And we'll conduct one GFA meeting within each geographic focus area. We do have 11 geographic focus areas, and then we've actually added a 12th meeting that we will be doing for participation by more of those regional agencies in nature. And that's this 12th region-wide agency team meeting right here. Our steering team consists of the members here. We have tried to get broad representation from at the regional level. We have UDOT, as well as jurisdictions from the Salt Lake Valley, as well as in Davis and Weber counties, and Utah Transit Authority and Tooele City. These are the 11 geographic focus area safety planning teams that we'll be forming. And each GFA is organized into about 6 or 7 individual jurisdictions. And we've named them here, and I'll show you a map of where your jurisdiction falls here. Here is that map where we have the individual jurisdictions separated by color. In the Salt Lake Valley area, we have the South Salt Lake Valley, the West Salt Lake Valley, and the East Salt Lake Valley, as well as Salt Lake City as its own GFA. In Davis County, we have the North Davis County and the South Davis County GFAs. And then we have Morgan and East Weber County as a GFA. And then in Weber County, we have the Central Weber, South Box Elder / North Weber, and the West Weber. And then we have Tooele as a separate GFA. Wanted to now give you just a treetop overview of what we've seen from our crash safety analysis within the WFRC area. Again, this is data strictly from the WFRC planning area, each of the county's areas here that I've shown on this map. This is the annual fatal crashes over the past 5 years. You can see within the WFRC planning area, we have increased from 110 down to 108 in 2019. And then each year we have increased up to 145 in 2022. This CSAP, the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, will focus on how to reduce those fatalities and serious injuries on primarily, well, I guess it is focused, as Kip explained, on the non-UDOT facilities. That is local roads, which are under the jurisdiction of the cities, the counties that are not state highways. Included in that is a federal aid roads. And that's what this map is showing here. The federal aid roads are in light blue and the state routes are in the orange. The data that I showed you on the previous slide does include both state routes and local roads, but we will be disaggregating that data with a focus on these federal aid and local roads. So it's this category here, the federal aid routes and the local routes, that are the subject of this comprehensive safety action plan. We may identify key segments and intersections that intersect with federal aid routes or local routes intersect with UDOT facilities and bring those to the attention. But as the funding is directed toward the local jurisdictions, it would be up to a local jurisdiction to take the initiative to partner with UDOT on identifying specific improvements to those intersections. So this is a summary of how we've seen crashes by those different classifications, the state routes, the federal aid routes, and those local streets. You can see we have over 1,200 fatal and serious injury crashes within the 5-year period on state routes. We have about just under 1,000 or so, or about 1,200 or so on the federal aid routes. And then the local streets, that's your neighborhood streets, your minor collectors, et cetera. We have just under 400 fatalities and serious injuries. And this is how those crash severity levels have changed by those classification levels. You can see on the state routes, the lighter blue have increased from 81 down to 69. And then we're at 100 in 2022. The federal aid routes have also increased to 16, 29, 31, 29, and up to 41 in 2022. And the local streets have actually shown a decrease within that same time period. These are some of the primary contributing factors by crash type that we have seen for those fatal and serious injury crashes. Predominance of left turns at intersections, roadway departure, and then active transportation. This here is showing our crashes by vulnerable user. You can see that pedestrian crashes involving pedestrians account for approximately 19 of fatal and serious injury crashes within the region. Bicycles account for 5%, and motorcycles account for 22%. So now giving the background of where we're at with the state of safety within the Wasatch Front area, We did want to talk here a little bit more about what can we do about that? What will this safety action plan focus on to help us address those fatalities and serious injuries? You may have all heard of what they call the safe system approach, and it's really a paradigm shift in how we perceive the safety problem. Rather than accepting fatalities and serious injuries as a price for mobility, the philosophy of the safe system approach is grounded on an imperative that no one should be killed or injured when using the roadway system. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of those key principles within the safe system approach. The guiding principle within the safe system approach is to improve safety, the safety culture, and focus our transportation system design and operation on anticipating human error and then managing the transfer of kinetic energy that causes fatalities and serious injuries when crashes do occur. The safety culture can be defined as the shared values, actions, and behaviors that demonstrate that commitment to safety over competing goals and demands. The safe system approach aims to eliminate fatal and serious injuries for all road users by accommodating human mistakes and keeping impacts on the human body at tolerable levels. This is a fundamental objective of the safe system approach. And what distinguishes the safe system approach from traditional approaches is the ethical imperative that not even one death is acceptable in our roadway system. Some examples of accommodating human mistakes include roadway features like rumble strips, which alert a driver when they unintentionally depart the roadway, or vehicle design features like autonomous vehicle braking, or which activate the vehicle to stop when the driver may not be able to do so. Examples of keeping impacts on the human body at tolerable levels include measures to control speed, physically separating users traveling at different speeds, for example, people driving and those riding bicycles. This is a diagram of that safe system approach. There are three components to understand. There are the approach, the principles, and the elements. The safe system approach is the broadest term and describes all aspects of the safe system. In addition, the term safe system is singular to depict an overall safe road system. We recognize that to achieve a safe system, we don't throw away everything that we've been doing already. In many cases, what the countermeasures that we already know to be effective can be further enhanced. There are many places to start, and including those from what we call the FHWA, Federal Highway Administration, proven safety countermeasures. There are 28 of these, and if you Google proven safety countermeasures, it will come up with that list. And it's a collection of these strategies that have been demonstrated and proven to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. FHWA strongly encourages implementation of the proven safety countermeasures to accelerate achievement of the national road safety strategies, including on urban and rural highways. These are three examples of those proven safety countermeasures. We have setting appropriate speed limits, using medians and pedestrian refuge islands, and roundabouts. Implementing the safe system approach requires moving away from several traditional safety paradigms. The first, rather than preventing crashes, the safe system approach seeks to prevent death and serious injuries. Second, in addition to trying to improve human behavior, the safe system approach designs for human mistakes and limitations. Third, while the traditional safety approach focuses on controlling speed, the safe system approach attempts to reduce system kinetic energy. Fourth, rather than asserting that only individuals are responsible, the safe system approach aims to share responsibility among system users, managers, and others. Lastly, instead of reacting based on crash history, the safe system approach proactively identifies and addresses risk. As we conclude in this overview of the safe system approach, it's important to remember that our primary goal is to save lives. To get the best result, We need to integrate this safe system approach into all of our safety framework, working together. And that's where we brought stakeholders from all disciplines, from planning, engineering, enforcement, emergency services, education together to help us to achieve this shared vision and how we think about road safety and how we prioritize our investments. As we move on with developing our comprehensive safety action plan, wanted to provide an overview of what our next steps are. First, we're completing our safety analysis, and that is underway. We'll be meeting with our steering committee in the next week, and then again in September to present our preliminary results. And then what we're focused on in the next couple of weeks is assembling those safety planning teams. And those will be comprised of engineers, planners, city management, elected officials, law enforcement, emergency services, and other community organizations that have a vested interest in improving safety. Again, those will be organized by those 11 geographic focus areas as I previously described. Then we'll be coming back to you to conduct a GFA planning team meetings in October of 2023. So how can you prepare to participate in the comprehensive safety action plan? First, as we prepare our materials, we'll be distributing those to you that will identify those high crash locations as well as the high risk locations. We'll want your input. Do those make sense within your respective jurisdiction? We'll ask for your input on potential strategies to mitigate risk and crashes at those locations, and then working with you to identify those critical safety projects within each of your jurisdictions. You can also begin now to discuss with your elected officials if there is interest in supporting a regional safety commitment, and then also preparing to submit an application through the SS4A grant program. Again, that NOFO will be out in spring of 2023 that will provide funding for implementation. Lastly, we have our project website that is now live, WFRCSafetyPlan.org. You can go to that website and review our current meetings that we've had, meeting information, materials, geographic focus area maps, and you can also provide initial comments that you may have. And those that, as you spread the word with your stakeholders, they will also have access to this website. So now would like to turn it, I guess first ask Jacob if there are any comments within the chat that need to be answered.
Yes, first question, with the recording, will people have access to the PowerPoint slides themselves? Or
Yes,
just
we
the
will
recording?
post these PowerPoint slides to that project website, the WFRCSafetyPlan.org.
Okay. Could you dive a little bit deeper, Brent, into explaining what this shift towards shared responsibility means?
Yeah, I think to me, it means that everybody has a role. It's not contingent just upon the user of the roadway system, the driver, the pedestrian, the bicyclist. It's not just contingent upon engineering. Each of us has a role in anticipating that people will make mistakes, and our job is to try and reduce the impact of those mistakes and those errors. As I described, it's through things like making sure speed limits are appropriate, rather than just resorting to an 85th percentile speed, making sure that they correspond to the context of the roadway condition. It's separating those users, making sure that bicycle facilities or pedestrian facilities are appropriately accommodated where there is pedestrian activity, so that vehicles and users are able to each have their reduce the kinetic energy or reduce the impact of reduce the likelihood of impact between those users. Jacob, if you have any other thoughts, or Kip, on what that means to any of you, or anybody else, happy to share that answer with you.
I think one of the main points of that shared responsibility is changing that mindset so that everyone understands that if we are to reach 0 deaths on our roadway, everyone needs to be responsible to make that happen. And everyone has a different responsibility when it comes to that, but we all have a responsibility to help that happen, even if it's just changing the behaviors of how we drive personally.
Yeah, I think the old paradigm is you take responsibility when you are on the roadway, and you should not make mistakes. And that's not realistic. And the new paradigm is humans make mistakes. And as Brent explained, there's ways to manage kinetic energy so those mistakes are not fatal or leading to serious injuries.
And as I mentioned, rumble strips are a good example of that. You know, people will wander, but the rumble strip is when they do wander, it alerts them instantaneously so they can correct themselves.
Brent, I think it would be good to kind of go into briefly a little bit more about how funding is allocated on a national level. There's questions about, you know, does a state get a minimum amount? Is it competitive across that?
Yeah.
And then there's some other questions we can add on to that.
Yes. And Kip, do you want to answer that one, or do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, can you restate that?
Yeah, so just a little bit more about how the grant program works, the SS4A
Okay.
program.
Yeah, and I was scrolling through the chat. I noticed someone asked about NOFO, which stands for Notice of Funding Opportunity. And so that in the past 2 years, those announcements have come in the spring, so we're expecting that pattern to continue. The grants are discretionary, meaning there's not a formula that each state is getting a certain amount of funds. If cities and counties don't apply for these funds, they won't be automatically made available to Utah. So you have to go out and compete for those. And again, there is a 20% local match associated with these grants. Does that help, or did I?
Yeah, and just a
Yes.
little bit more context. There's $5 billion a year for 5 years. And by statute, I believe it was 60% is for implementation and 40% is for action plans. And so we anticipate kind of and that's actually per year. So throughout the 5-year program. So in the first round of funding, they gave, I think it was over 800 action plans were funded by Federal Highway Administration for jurisdictions and municipalities and MPOs across the country. There was about 140 million that did not get allocated from year one that was rolled over into year two. And so they expanded the program in year two to accommodate what they call demonstration projects as well. And so you can find that if you Google SS4A, you'll find the NOFO that describes that. Wasatch Front Regional Council applied to prepare an action plan on behalf of all of the jurisdictions within the Wasatch Front Regional Council planning area. And so this project will satisfy the requirements for an action plan. So now the local jurisdictions in rounds 3, 4, and 5 can apply for implementation funding, or presumably they could also submit a request for a demonstration grant as well.
Brent, one thing to kind of answer several common questions we've had, maybe go into what the funding that can be used for, because there's been questions like educational videos for communication, public outreach. Can you expound a little bit on kind of how these funds can, and because there's limits into what these funds are allowed to be used for.
Yep. So I've actually gone to the website. Are you seeing my website or the?
Yes.
Okay, so I just Googled SS4A grant program and I've gone into the program website here. And so there's a lot of information here. Eligibility, let's see if it lists eligible supplemental planning and demonstration grant. So it lists for planning grants. Well, there's two program types. There's a planning and demonstration grant and there's an implementation grant. The comprehensive safety action plan that we're preparing right now is funded as a planning and demonstration grant. And the second type of grant is the implementation grant. So the planning and demonstration grants are eligible for these types of activities, developing additional complementary safety plans, road safety assessments, updating action plans, progress reporting, et cetera. And then the demonstration grants are intended to implement those actions identified by the action plan. This is actually here is looking at demonstration activities. So this is showing temporary bike lanes, looks like a temporary traffic circle, protected bike lane here, conducting engineering studies to help you determine what is appropriate long-term course of action, pilot programs, benefits of new technology, et cetera. And then I think trying to find the types of activities through an implementation grant. There's all sorts of Q&A here. Where does it? Oh, there we go. Eligible implementation projects must be identified, must include carrying out projects identified in the action plan. So we need to identify that project in order for it to be eligible for an implementation grant. Directly related to addressing a safety problem, they can include planning, design, and development activities, supplemental planning or demonstration activities to inform or update an action plan, projects that are not eligible, if they are not focused on safety, if they're not identified in the action plan, maintenance activities are not eligible, capital projects, construct new roadways used for motor vehicles are not eligible, development or implementation of a public agency safety plan is not eligible. So, and then on this website, it gives you kind of some additional examples of what is eligible and what is not eligible. It's pretty broad on the eligibility if it has a nexus to safety.
Well, and it's important to remember that this one is focused on the roadway network, on non-Department of Transportation roadways. And so
Local roadways.
Yeah, local roadways. So we understand that there's a lot that needs to go into improving safety for all road users. But it doesn't get into trails. It doesn't get into the off-roadway network. These funds aren't eligible for that. So one question, Kip, was, will WFRC be helping with the implementation grant applications, or will that be up to the local jurisdictions?
I think it'll be more up to the local jurisdictions, and they may want to, in some cases, join forces with neighboring communities, kind of pool their resources. You know, we can help to some extent, but our staff is limited, but we can point people, you know, to the right resources, websites, and so on to get those instructions. And one of the questions in the chat was, can the funds be used for education programs? And yes, they can. That is also eligible. I wanted to mention that the Safe Streets for All program wanted this, required that this action plan be the first step, and that we look at safety needs on a regional scale before cities would begin requesting implementation grants, so that this approach to safety improvements is a coordinated, systematic effort, not just random projects. So if there was some question why we're not building things now and taking all this time for a safety plan, that was required by the program, that we look at things regionally first.
Okay.
Hey, Jake,
Yes,
this is Wayne Benyon with Wasatch Front Regional Council. May I supplement some of those responses?
sure. I'm getting a lot of responses, and if someone else wants to join in, that would be more than helpful.
And I'll note again that we will do our best as a consultant and organizational team to follow up with answers to questions that do not get answered today. But I'll just note that yes, if there's a need to address safety issues at an intersection of a local road and a state road, our understanding is that if the state is agreeable to pursuing safety improvements at that intersection of a state road and a locally owned road, that can be an eligible type of project. And I'd also like to note, in addition to the 1 billion a year plus or minus over the next 3 years that's anticipated through the Safe Streets for All program, the intent with this action plan is to identify project types, project strategies that local governments can use and others can use to pursue funding from a variety of funding sources. You know, I think we do not want to limit ourselves to the Safe Streets for All program. So hopefully this will help prepare local governments and enable them to pursue all kinds of different eligible funding sources. Thanks.
Another question is successful applications for implementation grants. You can go online for the first year and you can see those agencies that were successfully awarded funding for implementation projects. And those specifically, you can look at what the project involves, how much funding they receive, and what they're using that funding for. So that's one way you can go in and look at those and see kind of what in this first year. And before any of these agencies would be eligible to apply, there will be a second year, so there'll be even more data points. But a lot of it is going for those systemic safety improvements projects on roadways. So yeah. And another thing is that applications don't have to be done in a silo. If an agency wanted to do a joint application with another agency, that is also an available option. An example of a joint application, I haven't dived into those to see, but if there was a roadway or a location that it made sense to look, let's say, a more rural area was looking at shoulder widening along their local roadways and they crossed multi-jurisdictional boundaries, you could go about that.
So you're saying, Jake, in other words, if there's a common type of strategy or project along a roadway that goes through multiple jurisdictions, those jurisdictions could partner in getting that those improvements consistently along the entire roadway through multiple corridors.
That would be something that they could consider for application if that's the approach they wanted to take.
Jacob, there seem to be quite a few questions about the interaction with this project and UDOT roadways. Just want to clarify or just reemphasize that the program is designed specifically, it does not go to the state DOT. But if there are, recognizing what the system in Utah is, you could see most of our crashes are on those state highways. So I think as we identify those issues within this project, we'll identify the issues and it will be up to the local jurisdictions to partner with UDOT if they desire a project to address those intersections. UDOT will not be a direct recipient of the funding. The funding does go directly to the local jurisdictions. And my understanding is for local jurisdictions that are not prepared to administer those funds, that those would be administered by the Federal Highway Division office. So that's what my understanding is. That certainly could change, but FHWA does recognize that this will be new for a lot of local jurisdictions and are working to accommodate and work with each of those jurisdictions as direct recipients.
So there have been several questions also about the safety analysis and the data that we're using for that. Brent, is that something you'd want me to expand on a little bit more, or do you want to?
I'm sorry, repeat your question, expanding on.
There's been questions about the data that we're using for our safety analysis.
Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
Okay, so one thing that's important to realize is due to the large nature of this and due to the time constraints that we have, we will be using as much of the available data that we have. There hasn't been time to collect new data or supplement it with lots of other things, so we are relying on already available data. But our focus in this safety analysis is, one, we're looking at historical crash data trends. We're looking at applying the Highway Safety Manual methodologies for systemic safety analysis. So not trying to chase crashes, but look at risks that are out there or items that lead to risk and how those risks could then be mitigated. So in the Highway Safety Manual, there are several methodologies for a systemic area-wide approach to looking at the areas that have higher risk that needs to be addressed. And so that looks at things like overrepresentation of certain crash types, probabilities, where you're getting more than expected crash types. And then we're also looking at what is called US RAP data, where that is a completely risk-based. This is something that UDOT has spent a lot of time in doing for those federal aid local routes. And it kind of ranks locations on a scale of 1 to 5 stars. And so those lower 1 and 2 stars are roads that have a higher risk or higher potential for crashes. So we're doing our best to be able to break that down into chunks that are specific to the area that year over or that you're looking at. But due to the high number of agencies and jurisdictions, we may not be able to get this down as detailed and specific for one particular agency as possible. We're doing our best to get there, but we can only do so much with that. And then that information will be used to identify locations that should be used in those GFA meetings to say, here's our high-risk network. Now let's look at developing project specific and prioritizing projects.
Jacob, we're just a couple minutes
Yep.
away, and so I think we probably want to head towards wrap up and want to turn it back to Andrew Gruber for concluding statements. But I express my appreciation to you all, and we'll try and do our best to compile these comments and get a response and back on the website for those questions we haven't been able to get to. So, Andrew.
Brent, thank you very much. And I just want to see Wayne or Kip, is there anything crucial that you wanted to add in the last moments here?
Please go to the project website for additional information, and like Brent just mentioned, for responses to questions that we did not get to today. And that's it.
And just looking forward to diving into this this effort and focusing in to those geographic focus areas and understanding the needs that each community has. So looking forward to this process.
Well, thank you very much to our team, the consulting team, and then really to all of you that are participating, the hundreds of you that are on from all around the region. There's a remarkable amount of knowledge and dedication and care about our communities that are represented in all the people here today. We appreciate all the questions and the ideas. We will continue sharing information with you about this process. We will post information on the website, as we just talked about. I do want to reiterate how important it will be for you all to participate. We have these October workshops that are coming up, and we really want and need you to be engaged. We want to be looking for different perspectives and voices and ideas about safety priorities. You know your communities best. You're in the best position to work together with your partners and with us collectively to make sure we're doing the right things to have our transportation system be as safe as it possibly can. And to that point, just to reiterate the broader importance of this, of course, we are trying to make our system as safe as possible to limit as many people being hurt or killed in transportation as we possibly can. That is a critical need. But this even goes beyond that to the whole future of our region. You know, our region is the fastest, our state, Utah, is the fastest growing state in the nation over the past decade. And we have a broad regional vision for how we can accommodate that growth and maintain high quality of life. We call that the Wasatch Choice Vision. And one of the key strategies for that is providing transportation choices to people so that they can drive or take transit or bike or walk. And we have to have people being able to feel comfortable making those decisions if we're going to absorb all this growth that we have in our region and maintain our high quality of life. And as I said before, if people aren't safe and if they don't feel safe biking or walking in addition to driving, then we'll never be able to accommodate that demand that we have coming. So this effort at having a really safe system in transportation is important to help prevent accidents and injuries, but it's also even more broadly important for our having great quality of life in our entire region in the decade to come for all of our communities. So we're so happy to be able to play an organizing role in putting this safety action plan together, but it depends on all of you being engaged, which I know you are. So we're so appreciative of everybody here More info to come, and we look forward to continuing to partner with all of you. And thank you for everything you do for all of your communities and our collective community. Thank you.